Hello and welcome to NewsClick. The Anna Hazare-led campaign for a better Lok Pal Bill seemed to have borne fruit with the setting up of a joint committee involving government and civil society representatives. Questions, however, remain about the structure of the proposed Jan Lok Pal Bill and also with the government's intentions. Even as the discussions on the bill are on, a smear campaign has been launched against committee members Shanti and Prashant Bhushan, and political wheeler dealer Amar Singh seems to be in the news these days. We have with us Sukumar Muralidharan, senior journalist and feminine analyst with NewsClick. Sukumar, you have read the draft of the Jan Lok Pal Bill, right? Critics say, or even a cursory look at the bill will tell you that the Lok Pal is constructed as a super institution with powers of investigation, prosecution, adjudication and even punishment. Also, the selection criteria of the Lok Pal seems to suffer from certain lacunae. Could you please elaborate for us?
Yeah, well, on the face of it, now this Lok Pal Bill has gone through several revisions. I think there have been 14 different drafts that have been in the public domain, and I have looked at 3 versions of it. There were serial numbers 1.8, 2.1 and 2.2, and 2.2 seems to be the most current at this time. And one serious issue there, which I think will likely cause it some hardship going forward, is the concentration of powers. Now, the Lok Pal as conceived under this bill has virtually full spectrum authority, from investigating allegations of malfeasance or misconduct or corruption to prosecuting them. It also has a power to decide upon the constitution of the bench that will hear the case, and to dictate how many special benches should be set up. So it kind of impinges on the independence of the judiciary, as we all know has been held by the Supreme Court to be part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Right. And now, if it surmounts that hurdle, let's say that independence as a concept can be construed in different ways, right, and this need not be. There could be a more liberal interpretation which says that this does not impinge on the independence of the judiciary. But it certainly does have implications for the principle of separation of powers, because separation of powers is very vital to functioning democracy, and this concentrates too much of powers in one institution. So that I see will be a likely problem going ahead.
How about the selection criteria for the Lok Pal?
Yeah, well, selection criteria reflects considerable confusion, if I may put it mildly, because initially they started off with a selection committee that was comprised of what I would call men of virtue, men and women of virtue. They somehow got this notion that people who are Bharat Ratna awardees and Nobel laureates and Magsaysay award winners would somehow be more authoritative and more reliable making these choices than elected officials. So you could conceivably have a committee comprising Lata Mangeshkar, Pandit Ravi Shankar. They also had a criterion saying that military officers of 5-star rank should be, of which there have been 3 in all of India's history, and there's only 1 living right now, Marshal of the Air Force, Arjun Singh. So it's not as if these people can necessarily make a better informed or more authoritative choice than elected representatives. Now, that has been dispensed with, fortunately. In the most recent version, they have given a role to the Prime Minister, to the Leader of the Opposition, to the Speaker and the presiding officer of the Rajya Sabha. Curiously, in version 2.1, you had a provision that the 2 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court and the 2 senior-most Chief Justices of High Courts will be on the committee. In 2.2, both these categories have been changed to the youngest. So you have the 2 youngest Supreme Court judges and the 2 youngest Chief Justices of High Courts that will be on the committee. Now, there might be a consideration, there might be a well thought out rationale for this sudden switch from one to the other, but that has not been explained. So we need some assurance that the committee is showing due diligence and application of mind in making these kind of sudden switches of judgment.
But this whole institution of Lok Pal seems to be drawn from the president of the parliamentary ombudsman, which exists in Sweden, also in some Scandinavian countries, right? Could that institution in the Scandinavian countries be replicated here?
Well, ombudsman in Sweden and Scandinavian countries is a very old institution, but 2 decades old, if not more, 2 centuries old, if not more. And My understanding is that they are created as they are the creations of Parliament. Right. They are creations of Parliament, and they report to Parliament, and they certainly don't combine these kind of powers in the same hands as this Lok Pal conceives. The Ombudsman would have to go through the established judicial process to secure conviction and sentencing of any offender, and it does not have powers of contempt of its own. It would have to move the judiciary to get that contempt enforced if it sees that its rulings are not being complied with. So it is a much more modestly structured,
more advisory, monitoring kind of body.
It's an oversight body with the power to move the established legal processes for redress of public grievances. Right. So in that sense, it's not really constructed with such wide-ranging powers as this Lok Pal Bill proposes to invest in.
Yeah. But such an institution can be replicated in one sense. You think there is grounds for an institution like that in this milieu in India?
Well, you know, the problem here seems to be that suddenly people have become very anxious about the problem of corruption, and there's a tendency to think in terms of extreme solutions. Right. Now, this Jan Lok Pal Bill, as we see it today, is very much of that, shows very much that this extreme reaction is set in, this kind of extreme revulsion to corruption in public life and this disdain for politics. Now, if you can sit back, think over these things in a sober frame of mind, and arrive at solutions that are best suited for this country. And above all, we got to be patient. You got to be resigned to the fact that you're not going to have an overnight fix to the solution, because the problem runs deep. And misgovernance, I would put it as a general problem of misgovernance. Corruption is one aspect of it. You know, there are several other aspects like lack of accountability, lack of responsiveness, complete neglect of the aspirations and legitimate rights and entitlements of the poorer sections. These are all aspects of the misgovernance problem, and corruption is one among many such.
That leads to the next criticism of this civil society movement in one sense, because they focus more on official malfeasance and they don't really question the roots of corruption in that sense. There is this whole phenomena of neoliberalism, the role of big corporates. These are questions and issues that are quite skirted by this movement in one sense. Don't you think so?
Yeah, well, if you think of the telecom 2G scam as one of the events that triggered off this mass movement against corruption, then the progress of the investigations has shown that certain of these big corporations are involved and they are being held accountable. There are people serving time in jail as we speak for their involvement in that scam. So yes, it is something that we will have to inevitably confront, and the provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act, which was passed in 1988, also could cover private individuals, corporate entities, if it is shown that they have played a role in suborning or in subverting the process of policy implementation through a process of illegal gratification of public servants. So that is already there. So inevitably the Lok Pal will have to confront that. But yes, the kind of public demonstrations of concern that we saw with Anna Hazare's fast seemed fairly oblivious to this aspect of it.
This so-called doctored CDs, or even CDs purportedly carrying conversations of Shanti Bhushan and other political leaders, there seems to be the government is trying to, it has a set plan. Initially it was that of compromise, even acquiescence to this demands of the civil society, and now it's shifting its discourse towards a smear campaign. Are you surprised at all?
Well, we shouldn't be surprised. We should all be prepared for all manners of strategies that will emerge from various quarters to stop this effort to enforce public accountability on our official governance institutions. And it's not as if Prashant Bhushan and Shanti Bhushan need any kind of special pleading from me or from anybody else. Their record of commitment to public causes and to civil rights issues is fairly clear. From the last 20-25 years that I have known of this record, it's been a fairly spotless and fairly impressive record of commitment. So for the media to suddenly, in the space of 1 week, switch from one view to another and to play up this CD without really bothering to check about its provenance or its origins is really quite strange. It's kind of indication that the media fits that description that somebody coined, that it's a feral beast that will devour anything that comes its way. So it's in some senses the kind of swing of the pendulum away from the mood that you saw in the media during the Anna Hazare fast, when one count is that one of the leading English news channels in those 5 days devoted 97 hours to the coverage of Anna Hazare's fast, which means like almost 20 hours in every day on average, as if there was nothing else happening in the world. Like there was no near nuclear meltdown in Japan, or there weren't assembly election campaigns going on in 5 rather important states of the Union. It's as if nothing else mattered, just this was their main concern and obsession. So these kind of mood swings of the media we have to be used to, but we got to figure out, where all this comes from, and keep our focus on the ultimate goal, which is that you ensure a greater regime of transparency and accountability in our governance institutions.